The global economy has not yet managed to recover from the global crisis that took place in 2008. In 2007, a real estate bubble that had been forming in a number of countries reached its peak, primarily in the United States, Spain, Ireland, Britain and Australia. The term bubble refers to significant amounts of trade in assets at prices that are inflated above the basic economic value of the assets. Housing prices started falling, borrowers stopped repaying mortgages, and the market collapsed. The economic crisis shook the global financial system, bringing enormous banking powerhouses to the brink of ruin. The United States, Britain and other countries nationalized banks and industrial companies. In 2009, the financial crisis led to the first global recession since the Second World War. And in 2010, a debt crisis broke out in Europe as a result of the 2008 financial crisis. The crisis harmed all of the different components that allow an economy to grow. Consumers saved more and spent less. Commercial investments shrunk. Companies were laying off workers. Factories were not opening. Nothing new was being made on the production lines, and innovation was stifled. When the crisis is global, customers abroad buy less and export is affected. The government has less revenue from taxes since its citizens have smaller incomes, and the government has to spend more on welfare for the needy. The result is a ballooning of government debt. The European debt crisis had serious consequences. At its peak, unemployment in Spain and Greece reached 25%. A crisis is part of the economic cycle of ebb and flow that we see throughout all of history. Prevention of financial crises that harm the economy requires thorough attention to matters of risk management, banking supervision, and the fiscal responsibility of governments in order to maintain financial stability. In a crisis, the price is primarily paid by citizens of the countries, with suffocating unemployment, hundreds of thousands of abandoned homes, cuts to pensions and welfare, and millions descending into poverty. An entire young working generation is exiting to a market without work. The generation that is growing up now in Europe will not receive a security net from their parents. Austerity could harm growth and create a lasting economic depression. In the long term, injections of funds from governments and central banks could reinflate bubbles that ultimately form a new crisis in the future. But let's face it, the government is in trouble as well. Like households or businesses that keep balance sheets, governments receive revenues from tax collection, the sale of natural resources, and from companies under its ownership. And it also has expenses, the salaries of public servants, building of infrastructures, training, and payment of social benefits. When government spending is high, the government is referred to as a big government. When the government receives large revenues, its balance sheet improves. This happens during an economic boom, where tax collected rises or the government raises taxes. Cutting spending also improves the balance sheet. Before the crisis, many European governments were in a recession, while Ireland and Spain, as a result of the real estate bubble, had budgetary surpluses. When the crisis broke out, government spending grew around the world, and they provided incentives, provided aid to businesses and banks, and paid unemployment benefits. Because of the economic recession, tax revenues plummeted, and the result was a sharp rise in deficits. When a government spends more than it collects, it is in a budgetary deficit, and it must borrow money in order to finance its surplus expenses. This is how government debts grew to dangerous proportions. Greece collapsed, Spain and Ireland reached massive deficits, and even the United States fell deeply into debt.